Hey guys, George at SoundTraxx here, and this week we're back with episode 3 of Rehab My Locomotive. Now, in this particular episode, we're going to go ahead and get our model put together and prepped and ready for adding the decoder, which will be in part 4. So, in this particular episode, we're going to go ahead and put the trucks together, we're going to paint the wheel faces, and I'm going to show you how to do all of that, and then we're going to go ahead and add our lights to the locomotive body and the frame so that way when we're ready to put the decoder in, we've got all the wires, everything's there and ready to go. So all we have to do is make the connections, install the speaker, and we're ready to fire away. So I'm going to go ahead and reorient the camera here and get you over my shoulder, and we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, well, before we put everything together, we're going to go ahead and talk about what lights we're going to add to the model, because this is going to be important. So, as we talked about in the last episode, we have our headlights and our number boards here on our cab, and we're going to show you how to do all of that. And then, as we talked about, we drilled out the holes for the class lights on the front and the rear. Now, one of the biggest things, and we're going to add the truck/ground lights here on the underside of the frame. Now, one of the biggest things, though, is that we notice that here on the back of the locomotive, we've got number boards, but the problem is that that's a solid piece of plastic. That's all cast as part of the top of, or part of the back of the long hood here. So, how are we going to light that? Well, I'm going to show you now. So first off, what we're going to do is we're just going to get, actually, you know what? Let's get a different drill and a different drill bit. We're going to use a number 75 here. And we're going to use this small pin vise again. And what we're going to do, and you want to make sure you've got just enough to clear everything. And what we're going to do is we're just going to drill a series of holes all the way around the number board here, and then we're going to cut it out with our knife, and then we're going to take our files and smooth it out. So you really want to have everything you need ready to go. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to take now there's a lip right around the outside edge here, or I should say the inside edge, and that's what we're going to use as our guide. So when we're drilling the holes, we're going to take our drill bit, we're going to kind of come up to it, and then you're just going to simply drill the hole. And it's going to go through. And then we're going to go right next to it, and we're going to drill out another one. And it's going to seem like this is taking forever, and you're not entirely wrong, because to drill out these small holes all the way around the outside edge of this number board, you're probably going to drill about, 15, 20 holes, something like that. Because what we're going to do is we're going to cut this out, and these small holes are what's going to guide our knife when we're cutting. And then we're just going to use a file to smooth it out to make sure that we are... So you can kind of see how this is starting. We've got a series of holes right here along the edge. Let me get rid of that piece there. And you can see there's a series of holes right here. And we're just going to work our way around. And then that way, the space between each hole is very small. So when we take our Exacto knife and go in, it'll just kind of cut through it like butter. And these holes are going to be pretty close together. Like you could see right there, I actually went into the next one. And just like I said, take your time. Put the holes next to each other. But again, don't go outside of that frame that is around the number board. Because if you do, then what happens is now you've got a bad lip on the outside, and then when you're done, we put our clear lens in place and everything, it just won't look right. Because we want to make sure these models look as good without the lights on as they do with the lights on. So that's where the challenge is going to be. And so you can take off a little bit at a time, and remember, use your drill bit. And even if you're not right up against the edge, don't worry about it, because your files can take a little bit off at a time, so that way when you're filing, then you can make sure to control how much you're taking off, so you can get as close to that edge. So you'll do a couple of swipes with the file, clean up that edge, and then inspect your work. And then you'll do it again. And then you'll do it again until you get a nice clean edge all the way around. And presumably, when we're done, we're going to have two perfectly matched headlight lens or number board lenses that we can cut out of clear styrene to make the pattern. So I'm just going to finish this one here because I'm almost all the way around while I'm talking to you. As I said, it's not hard to do. It just takes a few moments to drill all these holes, because again, you want to make sure you're moving around a little bit, and you also want to make sure that you're right where you want to be when you're drilling. So now we can look at this, and hopefully this shows up well on the camera. We've got a series of holes all the way around. So now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to take my Exacto knife, and this is where you do need to be very careful. Please don't cut yourself with your Exacto knife, but just kind of work your blade in, and those holes being already there will kind of guide where your knife needs to go, and the sharp edge will presumably cut through the holes that you're doing. And so you can kind of see now that I've got a series, a cut now going through, and we're going this way. And again, you want to be very careful, make sure you're not cutting yourself, because nothing's worse than cutting yourself. So be very careful where your knife is at. But we're just going to work our way around the edge here. And part of the reason we have to do this too is because these plastic castings are pretty thick, so we can't just sit there and take a knife and just scribe it in and just slowly cut it. So the pre-drilled holes helps guide the knife through, so that way when we make our cut, we're cutting exactly where we want to be. So there you can see now that the number board has fallen out. And here's the remainder piece of our number board. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go into the file drawer here. I'm going to get a couple of small files. I want a curved one so we can kind of file along this curve of the number board. But then we're going to get our flat one. And this is where we're just going to go in along the side of the edge here of the number board. And remember, take your time. Just go a couple of swipes and then check it again. You can always come back and file some more, but you can't grow it back if you've gone too far. Nice and easy. And then we can use our curved file to kind of get these corners to give a little bit more of a rounded. And remember, you have to be careful. This particular file, you can see it's tapered here at the edge, and so you don't want to go too far, or you could take too much off. And so this is where you just want to kind of be careful and know how much you're going to file off. And again, check your work constantly. So I've got a little bit more up here I want to take off. And that's looking pretty good. I go a little bit more on this inside edge right here. Now, one thing I will tell you, if you're not comfortable doing this with the handrails in place, they just come right out. You can slide your knife just under here and just twist, and these stanchions will pop right out. So you can pull the handrails off if you feel more comfortable doing this kind of work with that. You could even do this before all the work we did adding the detail parts. So it's really just up to you and your comfortability. One thing I would recommend if you have some scrap shells is try this method out first. And that way you can kind of get a feel for what it takes. So there we go. So there's what's left of our hole in the number board. So now I'm going to go ahead and do the other side off camera, and then we'll step into the next section, which will be adding the lenses, and we'll get our LEDs in place, and then we'll start getting ready to assemble the trucks and everything else. So I'm going to go do this off camera to finish the other side, and I'll be right back. Okay, so there's the 2 rear number boards removed and ready for adding. Now, I may not have mentioned it, I forget, but this is a number 75 drill bit, just in a regular small pin vise. You could use smaller if you want, just means you got to drill more holes, but it's entirely up to you, whatever you feel comfortable with. So anyway, so now we have the number boards drilled out. We've got our class lights drilled out. Our headlights, of course, are open. And so the way I usually like to do this is I actually like to put the LEDs in first, let them fully dry, and then we can put the lenses and such in there. Now, one thing I did forget, I did have to come in here and clean up the inside here a little bit because there was some flash and stuff from the filing and everything. So not a big deal. It's easy to clean up. So yeah, usually I like to put the LEDs in first because what it does is it gives the ability for the microscale crystal clear, which is what we're going to use to kind of glue our LEDs in place, some time to cure. And it also gives air on both sides, front and rear, so that there's nothing stuck in the middle there that might be frosted and potentially could compromise the look of the lens inside here. Anyway, so now what we're going to do is we're going to grab our LEDs. Actually, I take that back. What we're first going to do is we're going to take some heat shrink tubing. Now, what I've got is I've got some small heat shrink tubing that I have cut into small pieces. You can get pieces of our heat shrink tubing kit. Depends on, because you can see I've got some of the different colors here from our heat shrink tubing kit. But what you want to do is you want to get some small pieces here. Whoop, that's a piece inside of a piece. And we're just going to cut small pieces off of this. Because what we're going to do is we're going to use this heat shrink tubing as conduit. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to glue or cut small pieces of these. And the length doesn't matter. I like to go about a 3/8 of an inch or so, because the whole point of what we're doing with these is we're putting them up on the inside of the body shell, and this is what we're going to run our wires through. And so it does a couple of things for us. It helps us keep the LED in place when it's curing and drying, and it also once the light is dried and in place, it will help us manage the wires, so that the wires that we got different sizes there, and so the wires that we have in there will be managed so we can trace them easily. So let's say, I don't know, a year down the line, 2 years down the line, we get a burnt out LED, it's easy to trace. So what we're going to do is we're going to get our scrap pad, our scrap business card here. And what we're going to do is we're just going to take a little bit of glue, put a small little dab of CA. Now, with the heat shrink tubing, it's not a huge issue. So it doesn't matter if we have a little bit of CA on it. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a small piece of heat shrink tubing here in the nose. And what that's going to do is that's going to help me manage the wires coming from the class lights. And so you can kind of see it right in there. It's just up in the inside. And then when the wire's done, it's going to come down. It's going to go up through this, the cab interior, which means, of course, we're going to put a small piece inside the cab interior here. And what that's going to do is, again, it's going to help hold all the wires together in place. And one thing I apparently did forget to do, though, was to drill a small hole in the back here so that the wires can come out. So I'm just going to grab, and the drill bit size doesn't really matter. Just going to drill a small hole here in the back, preferably centered. There we go. Nope, my drill keeps wandering. There we go. Dope. Well, popped it loose. So let's just go ahead and do it this way. So I went ahead and just kind of tack glued the cab interior in place, but this way it's out. And that's where the wires are going to come out. And so what we can do again now is we can take a small piece of heat shrink tubing. We're going to glue it, apparently to my hand. We're going to glue it somewhere back up in here. And what that'll do is that'll allow the wires to run through this hole, up through the shrink tubing, and then we'll put some shrink tubing on the inside of the shell so that way it keeps all the wires up and away. So I'll glue this back here in a moment. Not a big deal. That's the worst thing that happens today. It's a good day. So what I am going to do, though, is we're going to get a little bit more glue. And in this case, what I like to do is on the inside here, right behind the cab, on the inside of the body shell there, I like to put 3 pieces of heat shrink tubing. And the reason for that is because 2 of them are going to be for the headlight and the number boards. And then the 3rd one is where my class lights come into play. And again, it's all about wire management. So you can kind of see now we've got our heat shrink tubing there. You can put it on the edges if you want. You can put them off center. And you know what? I think I'm going to do just that. So we're going to move this one and move that one over, because we've got that exhaust stack right here. And so if we have our our wires visible in there, this is stuck to the end of the tweezers here. But if they're visible through the exhaust stack, then it kind of ruins a little bit of the illusion of what we're trying to create. So it doesn't really matter. Like I said, the point of it is what we're trying to do is just have some heat shrink tubing to act as conduit, and then I'm going to put another one on either side of this. And in this case, we can do just 2, one on each side, because we can group 2 of them together, but it'll make it easier. Like we can take the number boards and the headlights, for example, and glue them together or run them through the conduit together, because ultimately it won't matter, because we'll know that it's going through there first. So you can see it doesn't really take up much. Now we're not shrinking it, because then that way it remains flexible. So if there is a tight clearance, the heat shrink tubing has some give. And so if it's tight, then it can flatten out and and it still holds the wire in place. Now we're going to do the same thing along the rear, but because we have these fans back here, we only have room for 1 on each side. So I'm going to put 2 pairs. Where did my glue go? Oh, let's get some more glue. I'm going to put 2 pairs, 1 on each side. But ultimately what that's going to do is it means the left light and the right light of each, whether it's the class lights, the number boards, or whatever, are essentially ultimately going to go through their respective side. Or you can wire them up together. You can do, like, for example, the rear headlight and number boards together on one side and the class lights on the other. It really doesn't matter, whatever you're comfortable with doing. Like I said, the whole point of it is just to make sure we're routing the wire through here so that, again, you don't have a bunch of wires visible through the radiator fans. And again, ultimately, doesn't really make that big of a difference. Just entirely what you're comfortable with. So, all right, we're going to go ahead and put this back in place. I'm going to get my glue adhesive, my glue applicator and my plastic cement. Okay. Now we've got that in there. And again, we're just going to tack glue it in place. And you can kind of already see where I had it before. And like I said, it was only designed, I only tack glued it in place in a couple of locations, so I'm not entirely shocked it came up. Because ultimately, all I'm trying to do is just hold it in place so that it doesn't rattle around loose inside. And then we can put a little bit of glue here in the inside. But you want to make sure it's centered as much as possible. Whoops. Knocked a chair loose. Well, get my giant Godzilla hands in here. And I mean, the reality is you don't necessarily even need to have all the chairs in here. It's entirely up to you and what you're modeling. You can leave some of these chairs out if you'd like, because remember, we're also going to add figures in here. Or did I not mention that? I may not have mentioned we're going to add figures. So there we go. So now we're going to let that dry, and the next step is we're going to add the LEDs, and then I'm going to show you how to route the wires through there and hold them in place. So I'm going to get my LEDs out and be ready, and we'll be back in a moment. Okay, so now that our shrink tubing is dried, I'm just going to show you really quickly. We're just going to install this one LED just so that you can see what it takes. And partially because we talked about it, I'm going to show you how it routes up. We're going to put this in the front class light, and you can do this same installation method for all the other lights as well. But we're going to take our tweezers, which is our best friend, and now you can do this before or after. I like to do it before, but we're going to go ahead and fish this through all these shrink tubing that we're going to use. And sometimes this can be a little frustrating because the LEDs don't always have the same idea of what you're doing. But for the most part, they'll work fine. But we're going to go ahead and route this through here. Now we're going to come over to the top. Oh, and it conveniently went right where I want it. Okay. Now we're going to go out through the front here. And you can see we got plenty of wire back here. Go into the shrink tubing up in the nose here. You can see right here that our LED is facing one particular direction. It doesn't really matter. But you want the LED part facing outward as much as you can. So what I'm going to do right here is I'm just going to kind of bend the wire a little bit and get it to where it'll kind of sit behind that class light over there. So now I've got enough wire. So again, so what I'm going to use is microscale crystal clear, and I like using this because it does somewhat remain tacky, or pliable, I guess is the word I was looking for. We're just going to put a small dab of this up inside the lens where the lens would be. And we're going to let that sit for a few minutes because the microscale crystal clear, it'll get tacky as it sits. And so as it's sitting there, it'll start getting a little bit tacky. You could also use a little bit of cyanoacrylate if you wanted to put a little dab of it there and help that or allow that to kind of hold the LED in place. You can certainly do that. And while you're waiting, you could run another LED, another wire around wherever you needed to run it, whatever you want to do. But what we're going to do, you can kind of see here where you see the microscale crystal clear. Now you can look through the front of this lens, you can see that it's actually there, but we're just letting it start to cure a little bit, and that'll help. Like I said, it'll get it tacky. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take this LED side of that and just shove it right into there and let the tacky microscale crystal clear hold it in place. But like I said, you could, while you're waiting, you could run the backup light wires, the number board wires, wherever you want. You could even come over here and let's grab another LED off of this tree over here. And we can do the same thing over here. So again, I'm going to take my microscale crystal clear because this one's going to be a little quicker. And we're just going to put a little dab back here where the headlight is. We're going to put that top one in first. Now apparently, I didn't put my shrink tubing inside the cab. So we're going to get a piece of shrink tubing here while we're waiting for that to cure. And where's my glue? Here it is. And we're going to put a little dab of the cyanoacrylate, CA glue, super glue, whatever you want to call it, onto our scrap piece. And then we're going to take our tweezers, just like we've done in the past. We're going to dip it in here, and we're going to glue this in place. Now, actually, I'm going to glue two of these because one's going to be for the headlight and one's going to be for the number boards. And that way I can kind of keep them separate. Not that it makes a huge difference. This is just, I like to do this. Just give me a little bit more coordination, organization, whatever you want to call it. Now, the other thing to keep in mind, too, is that there's these small little dimples here on the inside top of the cab. You can kind of see them right there. And what those are there is to help separate the wires from the factory, and then they use this self-adhesive tape, or this adhesive tape, to kind of tack it down and hold it in place. Well, I like the shrink tubing idea a little bit better. I have a little bit more control of where the wires go. So while I'm waiting for that to cure, let's check this one. Whoops, I forgot it was in the nose, and it's starting to look okay. So now what I'm going to do is we're just going to take our tweezers, kind of shove it into the glue, trying to get it to stay. I'm going to use the tweezers to kind of put that LED into the lens. And I'm missing it right now for whatever reason. There we go. Okay, so now you can see the LED is in the glue, and it'll just tack there. We'll just let it dry fully. Now remember what I said. Let's test. So we're going to pull our wires out over here. If I can get my fingers to cooperate. There we go. And hopefully you guys can see this in the camera. And I'm going to get my LED tester just to make sure. Now this is just a 9-volt battery with a 1,000 ohm resistor on it. And you can get these connections anywhere. You can even get it off old tools, off old toys, or whatever the case is. We're going to do that. And then we're going to touch the other lead over here. And now you can see that our LED is lighting up, so we know we're good. So now we just got to let that dry. Okay, so we're going to set that off to the side. Now we come back to our headlight, and we're going to do exactly the same thing. Of course, this one has a little bit less distance to go, since eventually, once this cab is put in place, we're going to run the wires through the shrink tubing. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this LED here, bend it at a 90 degree where I want it. Let's check these. Are these held down? Yeah, those are good. And like I said, this is just the way I like to do it. And then that LED is going to go right into that headlight casting. There we go. Now you can see that one's in place as well. And again, as I mentioned, test, test, test. So I need to strip the insulation off the end of this wire. Make sure we can access the wire. There we go. So now we got positive and negative LED. And there we go. There's our LED lit up. So hopefully that's coming through on the camera okay. So now we can just let that cure and dry. Now what I'm going to do is as I progress through here, you'll notice more towards the back here, there's a lot of lights that are kind of all built up together, because you've got the class lights down here, you have your number boards right here, and you have your headlights. So what I'm going to do when I do this is I'm going to put the class lights and the headlights in, the rear headlights in first, let them dry, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a big blob of this microscale crystal clear and paint over it to kind of make sure it's secured and stayed in place, just like I'm going to do up here in this front class light, but there's nothing else up here to bother it. But once that's done, then I'm going to paint over the blob. And what that does is it kind of seals the light in here. Because if I was to come in here and then do the number boards, and let's say this clear microscale or microscale crystal clear blends in with the blob for the headlight, well then the headlight LEDs could leak light into the number boards and vice versa, and that wouldn't be very prototypical. So you can do, like, say for example, you can do the two class lights first, let them dry, put this crystal clear in place, and then paint over it. Then move to the next one, the headlights, the rear headlights, do the same thing, paint over them, and then when they're done, then add the number boards. You can do it however you want. The biggest challenge and the time consuming for this project is waiting for this stuff to fully dry, because it is a few hours to fully cure so that you can paint over it. So usually what I'll do is I'll do, like for example, the two class lights up front, I'll do those first, and then I'll start the rear number boards or the rear headlights or whatever while the front's drying. Then I'll install the other lights, or, you know, for example here. Now, when we're doing our number boards, and let's grab another light here, and we can kind of do a similar situation. And in this case, what we can do is we can kind of bend the LED a little bit, just like this. And then since we're on this side, we can just thread it in through the hole that we drilled into the cab here. And then we can run the wires through the respective tubing, again trying to help make sure everything is organized and clean. And the other thing this does too is, in our cab we've just put an interior. We don't want a whole bunch of wires running through the middle of it just to make it look like a mess. There we go. Now it's coming through just fine. Alright, so now we're going to position this LED so that it's centered inside the number board here. So again, we can take our microscale crystal clear, put a small little dab on the inside, because remember, we're just trying to make sure we hold it in place. And same thing, we can let this cure for a few moments, and then we'll pull this wire through. And then with our tweezers, you can actually grip the actual LED itself with the wires coming off, and then you can place it in here where you want it, just like that. Now I know this stuff hadn't cured very much, so I'm just going to hold it in place for a moment, and then I'll come back and finish this up. But you kind of get the idea. So the LED will be kind of centered in here. so that way it'll give even light all the way across the entire length of the number board. And again, sometimes you can use cyanacrylite if that would make you feel better, as it's cure a little faster. It's not really a big deal. The cyanacrylite dries clear and it is translucent, which means it'll carry light. But the issue with the microscale crystal clear or the cyanacrylite is, let's say for argument's sake, in 6 months you need to remove this LED. Well, in theory you shouldn't have to, but if you do, now you have to chisel all that cyanacrylite up to get the wires out. Same thing if you glue the wires along the inside of there with cyanacrylite, again, you got to chisel all that out to get the light out. And it makes it kind of a challenge. So looking pretty good. So you kind of get the idea. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and wire up the rest of these lights, and then the next step is we'll start putting in our step lights, or not the step lights, I'm sorry, the ground lights, truck lights, whatever you want to call them. We'll start putting those in next. And so we're just going to go ahead and add these lights here. So I got 2 headlights, 2 number board lights, the other class light, and then the 6 lights back here. And we're just going to run them through the shrink tubing just like I did right here, and then we'll let the glue hold them in place. So I'm going to go ahead and add all these up, or install the rest of them, and I'll do that off camera, and then when we come back we'll install the ground lights. Now while we're waiting for those LEDs to dry, we're going to go ahead and add our ground lights, truck lights, to the frame. Now here I've got 2 of the Nix Trains Loco lights that we're going to use. Now I'm just going to do one of them on camera, and then I'll do the other one. And so we've got some magnet wire here, and basically what we're going to do, you can see how small this light is, and this comes with the electrical box right there, so that's what we're looking for. So what we're going to do is, remember the hole that we drilled in our frame, which is right here. We're going to go ahead and take this wire and feed it up through the frame here. And let's see, I think my hand needs to be, nope, there we go. And it just feeds right in, just like that. As we're feeding this through, we're going to get our light, and it's going to come right here. Now remember where we marked it. It's going to be right below where the cab sits in, so we can always test it again. We want to make sure to be as close to center of the cab, which is right about where our hole is drilled. So what we're going to do is we're going to take some cyanacrylite super glue. Again, we're going to get our scrap paper, and we're going to put a little bit of this. Now this is the instant dry stuff as opposed to the gel, because we're doing this quickly. Now the other thing, get yourself a cheap toothpick. What we're going to do is put a little dab of this right here, and we're going to put this ground light just to the outside of the frame, or just to the edge of where this frame is. And so we're going to use our tweezers to kind of hold it in place. Now if you have some of that accelerant, you can put a little bit of that there too to help this glue a little bit. While I'm holding it there, I'm just going to add a little bit extra here to the sides to help reinforce it, to make sure that it's got enough strength around it to help make sure it's secured. And there we go. So now you can see that the light is glued to the underside of the frame. Now again, we'll put a little bit more glue under there to help hold it in place. Again, just as an insurance policy, because we're just trying to make sure this doesn't pop off later on us. And what I did was I took the wires and just bent them down behind, and we're going straight to the hole that we put in the frame right there. So you can kind of see how it's sitting here in the frame now, and you'll see that the light casting is going this way, not sideways or angled or anything like that. So you want to make sure, because when you're looking at it the side, you want this curved bell part to be visible, because it's what's shining the light down. Now as we go along, when we're doing the installation, just like we did with our headlights, number boards, and so forth. We're going to test these LEDs to make sure everything works properly as we go. Now, some of you guys that have talked to me on a regular basis, I'm not a big fan of magnet wire, but in this case, it's kind of what needs to be done. So let's put that there, and then we're going to grip it there, and you can see that now our light is actually on. So everything's working. So we're going to let this cure for a minute, and then I'll show you how we're going to route the wire up and through the body, because when we do that, it's not going to, this is magnet wire, so it's extremely thin, so it shouldn't interfere with shell placement or anything like that. So that's where we have to be smart and add very, very thin layers of glue. So give this another minute to cure. Now, what we're going to do to route the wire, we're going to get some of this microscale crystal clear. This is a canopy type glue. So if you have canopy glue or something like that, you can use that as well. But what we're going to do is we're going to take our toothpick, and we're just going to smear a little bit in the corner here. And that didn't work out as well as I'd hoped, but the good news is we can move this around a little bit. There we go, just like that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take a little bit of this. I'm going to put it up the back side of this weight protrusion right here, because this is what we're going to embed the wire into. So we're going to let this sit for a minute as it gets a little tacky. Clear off the rest of this excess stuff that I put in the wrong place. There we go. Now this, like I said, this will get tacky here as it's sitting. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take our wires, just kind of bend them at an angle and embed them into the glue. Then we're going to let that sit for a few moments as it cures and embeds that wire in here. And we've got the wire taut underneath here as well, so we can put a little dab of this in this hole to kind of fill it up. Not that it matters all that much, but there we go, just like that. Clear a little bit of excess off like that. So now we've got our wires embedded here. And like I said, this will end up getting a little tacky as it dries. And then as this other one dries, then we're going to take our toothpick and kind of help manipulate the wire up into the other part where it'll go up and in, and then this will secure in this glue up here. And I'm doing this as a sort of rush job because I'm doing it on camera and trying to get it all here in this short period of time. But you can usually do one section at a time as you're doing your wiring job. So what I would normally do if I wasn't rushed for doing the camera work is I would do the channel along here, let it dry, and then move the wire up and go along the edge up here. But as you can see, you can also go a little faster because the canopy glue dries pretty quick. So we'll let that set for a few minutes. But you can see now we've got our wire embedded here in the corner, and it's pretty tight to the corner there. You can kind of see how that's in there. And then you'll see that it jumps up around here. And then remember, this is where our flywheel sits, so we have to make sure we retain this up against that. You could go up on the front side too. I just went up the back side because right here is where the cab interior is going to rest. So I wanted to go in here where I know nothing's going to interfere with it. Okay, so now we've got that. And again, this is where test, 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 test. So we're going to again check our wires, make sure everything's working. And there you go. So you can see that our light is working. It is flickering because one of these has got a loose contact, but that's okay. I'm more concerned just making sure that the light lights up. And so now we'll let that sit and dry, and then I'll do the other side off camera. So when we're done, now we'll be able to come back and install the trucks. We'll reassemble the trucks, install the trucks, and put the motor and the driveline, everything in, and remount up our fuel tank underneath the fuel here, underneath here. And then we'll be getting close to being ready to install the decoder. So like I said, I'll do this other side off camera, and I'll be back in a moment. Okay, so I've got my wires in here, and we're going to go ahead and paint and touch up the inside to make sure we minimize the light bleed. But while we were talking about lights, I wanted to show you this, since this is on the workbench as well. But I've got this Atlas B23-7 cab, and you can see they've got the gray wipers on there and everything. But the reason I wanted to point this one out is because when you're working on these models, this is usually what's inside the cab here. And what it's doing is it's taking the single LED from the backside and shining it through this clear plastic tube or pipe or whatever you want to call it, and kind of shining it so that your number boards will illuminate, but then the straight on is where your headlight casting is. These two little tubes that stick out are the light pipes. The reason I want to show you this is because if we're backdating and going back to older models, this is a classic example. And so what you can see here is what I've started to do is right along here, I've started cutting where I'm going to break this into three pieces, where I've got the center tube for the headlight, and then I've got the left and right for the number boards. And so what that does is that allows me now to separate the control of these, so I could illuminate the number boards with the headlight extinguished. But on these older Atlas models, and this is the rear, you can see it's exactly the same way, where you have the LED appear right back here and then shine through all this. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take a simple razor saw, and I'm going to move some of this out of the way for the moment. There we go. And so in this case, I'm taking the flat side, which is this right here, and I'm setting it on my work table. And I'm just taking my saw and I'm just going right along the, you don't have to put a whole lot of pressure, just gently do it, let the saw do the work. And we're going to carefully go in here and break this into individual pieces. And the further you get through, you'll work your way through. But one thing you want to be careful about is sometimes this isn't always flat. And so at that point, you kind of have to take into account. So right now, this top side is here. So if I'm trying to cut on this side of it, with this being not a flat surface, it may potentially run the risk of breaking these lenses, pipes, whatever you want to call them, off. And so this is why we're just going to gently go through here. And like I said, let the saw do the work. Just go slowly. And eventually what will happen is you'll get to the point where this side will break off, or whatever the case. But we're just going to cut it slowly, just kind of holding it in place on our, this is the self-healing mat that you can buy for cheap at the craft stores or your local hobby store. But these things will save your workbench. Because these are replaceable. It's a lot harder to replace the piece of wood on your workbench. But anyway, we're just going to slowly work our way through here. Again, let the saw do the work. And I'm having a hard time holding it, so you could usually get some double tape or something, but there we go. You can see that just breaks right off now. So we're through it. Now in this case, this is a separate piece, so you can saw through here if you want. Usually you'll notice this section right here is what sticks into the light casting. So right now you can see that kind of sits in there. So you want to have a little bit behind here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it about here. And since I'm no longer attached with these very, very fragile, thin pipes here for the lens, I'm just going to grab a set of side cutters, come in here, and I'm just going to cut that off. Now I have a small little piece. Now if you want, you can smooth that out. If not, doesn't matter. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to take a drill, put a little dimple in the back here. Doesn't need to be deep. We're just putting it in there. So now I've got a small little dimple here. And then now what we can do is we can take our LEDs, these are the 0402s I mentioned before, and just glue them in place. And then you'll have basically 3 separate pieces now, one for each side and the center, that will now each have their own LED, and now you can wire them up inside the model independently. So this is how you would go and address doing the old Atlas style. So you can see how it would come together. Now the other thing you can do if you're worried about light bleed, you can come in here and trim this off, because what you want to do is you want to come in here and let's get a file. You get one of these files here, and we can come in here and separate it. So once we're done, we can come in and paint over this, so that way none of the light here will bleed into the headlight casting. And then when we're done here, we can cut this short, just like we did there, and then we can drill our hole for the LED and do the same thing on that side. So that's kind of how you would address some of these older ones. Like I said, this is an Atlas model that I happen to have on the workbench that I wanted to show you with that also. So I'm going to go ahead and set that aside. So now I've got our model. Now I've got some of the lights in here. You can kind of see that I've got the LEDs for the number boards just dangling here, and we'll take care of that in final during assembly once we get the number boards built. But I got the 2 for the headlight back here, and inside the 2 for the headlight are kind of down in the middle. Hopefully you can see that in the camera. And what we're going to do is we're just going to put some paint over this so that when we come in with our number board, the microscale crystal clear to seal it up, there's no connecting, how shall I say it for lack of a better term, clear adhesive to allow light to leak from, say, the headlight to the number boards, and then same with the class lights. Now I haven't installed the class lights yet, but I will do that. That's what these LEDs over here are for. I'm going to go ahead and show you how I do this. Now, after these dried, what I did then was just took a big blob of this and basically just glued it to the back and just kind of created a shield. Because if you start painting and paint gets in front of the LED, then it ruins the illusion. But if you seal it in with the microscale crystal clear, then you have a surface to which to paint. So we're just going to take, again, some true color paint. In this case, I'm using aluminum. Because sometimes I have seen it where the paint, when this is under your layout light, sometimes the paint will reflect some of the light back, but if you use nothing but black in there, then this looks like a gaping hole versus this aluminum, which will create the reflector. So we're just going to take our aluminum paint and just kind of like, doesn't have to be pretty. Remember, this is the inside of the shell, so we're just going to take a little bit of it and just kind of cover what we sealed in. Now, like I said, this is a minimal effect. It's not really going to create much, but you can kind of see here inside there the silver back there. We're going to do the same thing on the backup lights back in the back of the cab here, or the back of the long hood. And again, remember, this is the inside, so it doesn't have to be pretty, but if you do, just be careful you don't stick your brush out the back of here and potentially where the number boards are and potentially paint there. So you can use a lot in here if you want. It's up to you. Because ultimately, again, we're trying to minimize any interior leaking, because when these lights are illuminated, for example, we've got visible fans right here. And so we want to make sure that that light doesn't shine through the radiator fans, or else, again, it ruins the illusion. So with those done, now we're going to grab our cab and we're going to basically do the same thing here. I don't need to do it inside the number boards because that'll be a decal over there, but we can do this on the headlight. Just kind of touch it up a little bit. And again, remember, we're just trying to make sure that we seal it up so that there's no light leaking in the cab. Because when the headlight's on, if you're looking at it from the side and you see the light into the cab, it kind of, again, it ruins the illusion. Because these would be sealed beams, and so when the headlight was on, it wouldn't be coming out through here. So that's it. That's all we're going to do on this particular segment. I got to install the other class lights and finish that up before I get any further. Now, one thing I do want to mention beforehand, before I go, is that this particular model is shot in a black plastic. And so I'm not really too worried about light leakage coming through, say, the number board if I illuminate the headlights. But that doesn't mean all models are the same way. There's a lot of models out there that are shot in a gray plastic. And what can happen is if you put your LEDs right here, they will actually cause some glowing around because the coat of paint on the outside of the body doesn't necessarily seal it off. And so what we'll want to do beforehand then is you'll want to paint a black paint on the inside of all of this before you glue the LEDs. And then you'll apply the black paint, let it dry. Then we're going to take our silver and apply it so that typically the entire thing here has a reflector look to it. Then you're going to glue your LED in place, seal it with the microscale crystal clear, and then paint the silver. And then once this dries later on this afternoon, I'm going to do this off camera because you just saw me paint. I'm going to paint all this black. So that way it's virtually invisible, especially in the cab, because we've talked about, we have our cab interior. We're about to put figures in there, and we're going to seal this up, and we're going to use the black. So all of that will be virtually invisible. It's pretty much not easy to be seen anyway, but the black will also make sure that there's no light leakage into the body, whether it's in the front or the back here. So, but I wanted to show you this where I was at a point where I can paint some of this and show you that. So then after this is done, you would go back and paint the black over the silver and really seal it in. So, all right, next step, we're going to go ahead and assemble our driveline, get this ready to go so that we're ready for part 4, which will be installing the decoder and connecting all of these wires. And so the biggest challenge when you're doing this is you want to make sure that these wires are protected and clean so that you don't damage them. Because remember, these are covered with a very thin coat of insulation. And so if you damage or nick it, then you can cause shorts, which is one of the reasons why I'm not a big fan of magnet wire, but sometimes you have to work with tools and things you don't like to make the effect right. So, all right, I'm going to go grab my stuff and get ready to put the trucks and the side frames back together so we can get this ready, and then I'll finish gluing in the class lights on the locomotive body so that we're ready for final assembly. All right, before we assemble the gear train or the drive train, we're going to paint the wheel faces. Now, one of my favorite colors of all time to paint the wheel face is what was known as Flocal Rail Brown. And this is a very close, this was the Model Masters Railroad Tie Brown, which again has also been discontinued. So I don't have much of this left, so I use it sparingly. But I'm using it as a guide because I have made this color using Vallejo with US Olive Drab and US Field Drab to create this color. So I have in front of me here a color dish, a paint dish, and we're just going to take some paint here. We're going to put a little bit in here, and then we're going to get a few drops of this olive drab in here because it does have a brownish green look to it. We're going to mix this in. We'll see how close we can get. So, pretty close. Close enough for me. So, you can see that was pretty easy. But what we're going to do is when we paint this, we want to make sure we just hit the face of the wheel. And we're just going to go around it like that. And pretty simple. But this painting the wheel face will give it not only a weathered look, but also just kind of help eliminate the model feel. Because when your wheels are super shiny like that, sometimes they can look a little too fake. So, and if you get a little bit on the edge, So what? Just wipe it off. Now the Vallejos, will say, are Vallejo, whatever you want to say it. They are an acrylic base. So the good news is when we're done, the brush will wash up with just water. And I was turned on to the Vallejo paints by Brett at Railtails in Virginia. I'd never really looked at them before, but he touts the greatness of them. Him and I spent some time on the phone, learned how to use them, and now I'm pretty happy with them. So I use them quite a bit. I still prefer my True Color, but I use them a whole lot more often now than I ever did. Let's see, did I get the other one? Yeah. So this goes pretty quick and easy. And honestly, you can use this type of method to paint the wheel faces of your rolling stock too, because the rolling stock wheels, again, when you have those super shiny wheels on your models, you know, it's kind of evident. And this little bit just takes almost no effort. And you don't even need to take the wheel sets out of the trucks. For example, if you're doing a freight car truck, you can just kind of hold the brush there and just kind of rotate the wheel in the truck. And you see how quick and easy this goes on. And remember, the shade of it's not exact. It doesn't need to be perfect. Remember, we're just showing kind of some rust, some dirt, oil, grease, all that kind of stuff that potentially could be on the wheels just from daily use. But just painting the wheel face alone creates a better feel and a better look for the model. So I'm going to start as soon as this is done. As soon as I'm done here, I'm going to start reassembling my gear drivetrain, and we're going to put it back in the chassis here. Now, the assembly of this is going to be exactly the same, except in the opposite direction as we did in part 1, where we took it apart. So you don't need to see me put it back together. But this was an important part I felt to make sure that you have that good weathered look, and you want to also get the edge of the wheel too. And there you go. So while those dry, I'm going to go clean up my brush, and then I'm going to start reassembling my gear, my drivetrain. And then the last step we're going to be doing on our SD40 is we're going to be installing the number boards. We're going to install the cab, and we're going to put some crew figures in the cab really quickly before we put it together. And then we'll be ready for Decoder, which will be part 4 of this series. So be sure to stay tuned for that. And I'm going to do the rest of this off camera. And the next time you see this, will be fully assembled with the gears in place. And we'll have our truck side frames and everything ready to go. And I'll show you how that looks. Okay, guys, I was putting this back together, and I realized there was something here I needed to talk about. Now, on these RTR motors, when we remove this circuit board at top, it also takes away our M+. Now, if we're reusing the circuit board and you want to plug into the 9-pin wire, great. On this particular one, I don't. So you can see that here on the bottom, they've got a wire soldered here to the top, but I want to solder a wire to this, but I don't want to do it while it's attached to the motor. So the one thing you want to pay attention to is underneath here is a spring, and that spring holds pressure on the brushes against the armature. So what we're going to do is we're just going to grip this little piece right here, and we're going to gently twist, and it's going to lift it up, and this is going to come up, and we're going to solder to this piece, but you'll see there's a spring under here, and so you want to make sure you don't lose that spring. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my soldering iron, and just right here in the notch, right there, I'm just going to put a little flux, and I'm going to grab a pair of tweezers to hold this down. And we've also got our pre-tinned wire. Let's see, let's move this back better on camera. So there we go. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my soldering iron, grab a little bit of solder on the end here, and we're going to tin the end of our wire, just like that. Now, I don't need all of that length, so we can cut it a little short. Now, this is where holding it with tweezers is going to be helpful. And again, we want to get some solder on here, and basically we're just going to solder this right here in this crux, and that's going to become our motor plus lead. Now you can see it's soldered in there nice and tight. I'm going to give it a second to cool. Yeah, it's still pretty warm, but we're going to go ahead and put that back so we can just kind of do the same thing. So you grip it around, you see the curvature here on the back of the motor, of the clip here. So we're going to grip it like this, put it in the channel. We're going to lay it on top of the spring, and then that's just going to snap down in place. And now we have our motor lead, and then we have our motor wire coming off the bottom. And once we get it together and we put these wires in there, I'd used an orange wire because it's typically the top, but we can verify that this is positive and this one's negative. What we're going to do is we're going to take a 9-volt battery and just touch the ends of the wire just like that, and you can see that our motor turns. And so that way we know which way it's turning, but you want to do that after it's assembled so that way you know which way it's going to go. So I'm going to finish assembling this and be back. Okay, we've got our chassis reassembled. You can see I've got the trucks under here. Pretty much almost ready to go. Last thing we want to do though is we need to make number boards, because as I mentioned in one of the earlier ones, Athearn made these beautiful number boards and they look fantastic. There's only one problem. They painted the whole back of it black. And so what they did was they printed the numbering here, and then they just printed a giant stamp on the back that's black. So when we put that in there, if we try to light it up, nothing's coming through because it won't light up behind it. So usually what I'll do in this case is I'll grab a small file, a small flat file. There we go. And you can try to do this. I haven't been successful with it, but just take some light strokes with the file and try to file away just the black paint behind the numbers. You can kind of see here it looks like it's trying to work. But what's happened there is that it's very difficult, and you can do this. A lot of time what I've done with these, because now you can see I'm starting to already get through. So the 0 you can see is I've already gone too far. The 0 has the open hole where it's clear. So what I'll just do is I'll usually just take this and just file away the whole backing. And that way I end up with basically a clear piece of number board that I can now use. And what we'll do is we'll put a decal on the outside of this, and then we'll glue it in place. So I've got the other one here, and we would do the same thing. But before we do that, before we put any decals on it, we can you can see I've got my LEDs here ready to go, but they're not sealed in yet because we need to put these lenses in. Now, as you can see, we take these are the ones off the front, and if we take that in there, you can see it lines up pretty good as far as sizes. So we're just going to take this clear piece of styrene sheet, and basically we're going to cut out new ones. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to get my metal ruler, and what we're going to do is we're going to put these 2 number boards along the edge here, and we're just going to cut a strip that is about the right size. We're going to use our number boards here as a guide. So hopefully you guys can see this. And so I'm putting 2 pieces along this straight edge, making sure the edge of the number boards is lined up, and it looks pretty good. So we're going to move our number boards out of the way. We're going to get our Exacto knife. And again, this is where you ideally want a fresh, clean blade. And then we're just going to gently go across this once to create a scored line. And usually it doesn't take more than a couple, three. There we go. There we go. So now we have a strip of styrene, clear styrene, that matches our number boards. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to cut two pieces to fit, and then we're going to kind of round the corners a little bit. So come over here to the end, and this is where we'll go ahead and put that under here so I can bring it over here. And basically what we're going to do is we're just going to take it, hold it in place, and like I said, we're just going to try to create an exact copy of it. And we're going to take our Exacto knife and just kind of cut it in. Now we have a piece that's very similar in size. So now we can take our file, just kind of round the corners a little bit. They don't need to be super rounded, just rounded enough. Because remember, we were cutting these and rounding the corners just a little bit. So we're just going to do that. And just like that, we've got one side. And then we'll do the other to the other side. And then we can come over here and we can test fit and see how it fits. And looks like it's a little tall. We can file it down a little bit. But this is where test fitting everything is going to come into play. And then we're going to go ahead and just file the edge a little bit. And you should have a series of a bunch of different size files, different textures, some that are finer than others. So that way you can come in here and do the fine filing as well as coarse filing. Because when you're trying to create a part, you want to do a little at a time, little cutting at a time, because then that way you can have your, come on, there we go. So that way you can do a little bit at a time, because you can always cut more off, but it's harder to grow the piece bigger to fit if you went too far. We've talked about that before. All right, now again we're going to take it and just kind of line it up and test fit it. That looks pretty good. So you can see, and that's clear, so we're going to round the other corner and then we're going to make another one. Now, once we're done that, we're going to use this decal sheet that we made. And these are just a Word document. You can go with this EMD font, 6.2 point. And this EMD font you can get on the Baltimore and Ohio Historical Society website. You can download it and install it into your Word document, so that way you can just print these off. And basically all I did was do white print bold using the EMD font, and then all around it just use space with highlighter in black. And then what we're going to do when we're done is we're just going to take this, and here's our 3041. I'm going to take this and line it up, and then we're going to cut it so that fits right there. Pretty simple. Then we're just going to apply it like decals. And this, as I mentioned, this is white lettering, but we're printing on white decal paper, so that's why it's coming through as white. So it'll retain its white going through, so that way we can leave the number boards clear so that more light shines through, and then the black of the ink on the decal will then block out and allow the 3041 to be pronounced. So I'm going to go ahead and finish the rest of these off of camera, and then when we're gluing them in place, we're going to use the microscale crystal clear, whether we're doing it here on the back of the long hood or in the top of the cab. And then the last step we're going to do is we're going to put our figures in the cab, and then we're going to install our cab. So I'm going to go ahead and do the rest of these number boards here off camera and come back to you in just a moment. Okay, so I've got my number boards drying right now. So what I did was I took a small piece of double stick foam tape and just taped it to this is a background of a packaging, and then just set the number boards on here. Then I applied the decals, and then right now they've got setting solution on them, so they're just drying. And this is something we can install in the model once they're finished. So before we put the cab on, let's add some crew. So these are figures that you can get from Broadway Limited, and they're their engineer figures. They're just two seated guys. Pretty simple, but they're nice and compact, and they're going to fit well in this cab. Now, I decided not to paint the interior of the cab because, quite frankly, some were gray, some weren't, but we're going to go ahead and make it this way. So what I'm going to do is, in this particular case, I'm going to grab my scrap piece of business card here, and then we're going to use this gel. This is the super gel. So what this does is this takes a little longer to dry, which will be really nice. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to put some here on the engineer and fireman's butts, and maybe a little bit on their back. Now, normally if I was doing this and have a little bit more time, you could use the microscale crystal clear like we've done for other things. But what we're going to do is we're just simply going to put him, whoops. Of course, they always fall off of your tweezers as soon as you need them to, as soon as you don't need them to. So what we're going to do is we're going to put these figures in here in the chairs. And when you're doing this, you want to make sure that you're going to clear the sides where the cabs are coming down. Okay, so let's grab our engineer and put some on him. And the reason I'm using CA this particular time is because we're about to put the cab on during the same clip, and I wanted this to dry fairly quickly. Whereas we'd have to wait a little longer for the microscale crystal clear to dry up and be tacky enough. So now we have our crew figures installed. And, well, because, I mean, we have to add crew figures because who's running the train? Ghosts? So, pretty simple. And they fit, they're just about perfect, and they're nice and compact, like I said, so we should have no problems. So now the next step is we're going to go ahead and install our cab. Now, in this case, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to run your lights, your wires for your lights where you want them. Now we have two, as we did last time, we have two pieces of shrink tubing here. So what we're going to need to do is separate these. So what I did is in the cab, I've actually separated them by headlight and by number boards. So you can grab them up and just kind of twist them together so that they'll stay together a little bit better. And doesn't need to be perfect. Remember, we're just putting them in place for right now. So we're going to go through the notch that we've cut here in the top of the cab. And then now when we come to the inside of the model, we want to make sure we use the shrink tubing that we had assigned for this purpose. So I'm putting the number board wires up against the sidewall. or the inside of the body shell here. And you can see how they're coming through. I got a fourth wire somewhere that needs to come up and in here. And this just takes a little patience, because it'll all be well worth it in the end when we're able to wire everything up, as you'll see in part 4. Because when everything is wired up and all the wires match, then it's nice and easy, because then we know what wires go where, so now they're easier to trace. And I've got a second one here, and in this case, the second one is to make sure that the wires don't go through the exhaust stack, because again, that kind of ruins the look of what we're trying to go for. I got this second wire now being a pain into this second hole here, or the second tubing. There we go. Now the 2 black wires are in, and now we're going to take the, oops, there we go. Get the red wires in. And then once these are in, come on. There we go. All right, now once these are in, then we can get the other 4 wires, which are our headlight wires. And again, we can do the same thing here at the end, kind of twist them up a little bit so they stay together a little bit better. Hopefully this will make this second time a little easier. So again, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to come through this notch here. Now we're going to grab our 4 wires, and we're going to run them through this second tube. All right, and I'll run these through the other tube here in a minute. But once you have these in, then we're just going to pull the wires through on the inside here. And as we pull these wires in, you'll make sure that everything lines up and goes where it's supposed to. Now, once we're close, then it's time to mount the cab. So now we're going to find the channels where they set in, where it's set in before, just like that. And then we're going to slowly work it down. Now, when you're doing this, you want to move these handrails out of the way, because they will almost always get stuck under the cab. As you can see here, every single one of them did. Now, once they're out of the way, we slide this down and snap it into place. There we go. Now, there's our cab. Everything's in where it needs to go, and we have our wires run inside. So the last step here, then we would just apply these handrails into the holes that we pulled them out of before, and they should just fit right in. Just line right up and go in. There you go. Now everything's lined up where it needs to go. I have to put a little dab of glue here because this windshield wiper came loose. Uh-oh. There we go. Okay. And there we go. So our cab's in place. As you can see, it looks like a mess of wires. Don't be intimidated by it, because we've been organizing everything, so we know what wires are for what, because we've been sorting it out. Now, to be fair, the back ones, the left and right, go through each side rather than switching sides. So those will have to go back and test to figure out which ones are which. That's going to be an easy task. The others are pretty much organized according to the purpose of the wires. So now the last thing we have to do is mount our lenses. Now we have these lenses. These particular ones are Detail Associates. I think Details West makes some as well. But you can use either one of them. Now, when you're mounting these, I do highly recommend using the microscale crystal clear, because the crystal clear obviously is what is intended to make a lens, and therefore will create the clear adhesive. So we're going to put a little bit down here on a piece of paper. We're going to get our Exacto knife and let's cut off a couple of these class lights. Okay, now with our class lights cut out, oops, that one needs to be trimmed. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to just put a little bit on the inside of the housing here, making sure that it just stays inside. Then we can use the tip of our toothpick, grab the lens, and use the lens to place, or use the toothpick to place the lens. And at this point it doesn't want to come off. There we go. Now we use the other end of the toothpick to place it, so you can see that our lens is placed perfectly there. So again, we'll do the same thing. We'll get a little bit, we'll put it on the inside of the hole here. Now let's grab our other lens, which is right here. And that one went a little easier. There you go. Now we're just going to let that dry, and then you can do the same thing for the headlight lenses. You can see that we have, on this particular casting, we have some lenses with long pieces on them, or just the surface lens. Because our LEDs are in the back of the cab, I'm going to go ahead and use the deeper ones on this particular one. So let's trim that out. And this one's going to be basically the same process. Get a little bit of this to put on here. And then now this time we can use our tweezers to grip this and to insert it. Uh-oh. That one doesn't want to go all the way down. Nope, that one doesn't want to go all the way down, so I may have to clear this out, but you get the general idea. This would be the same process as what we're doing for the glass lights. So I'm going to go ahead and work on this and finish this up, and then we'll show you how to install the number boards, and then that'll be the end of this segment, because we'll be ready to install the decoder. So that's it for now. Be back in a minute. Okay, so now we've got the number boards done, and basically we've got the decals placed onto the number board lenses, and just we put the microscale Solvaset on it, got them settled in, and then just as an insurance policy around, I painted the edges black just to try to minimize light leakage. So now we're just going to put them in, and we're just going to put them back in place up here in the front. So we're going to take our microscale crystal clear, and we can take just a little dab of it, doesn't take much, and then we're just going to put a little bit of this just on the inside edge here of the inside of the number boards, kind of just like that, because it doesn't take much, and we just need to hold it in place. So we're going to take our tweezers, kind of line it up, and put them in place. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the flat part of the tweezers to kind of make sure they're evenly applied and make sure it lines up. And so just like that, we've got our number board in. Now we're going to do the same thing to the other side here. And that's where the toothpick comes into play, because you can kind of control just how much adhesive you're using, so that way make sure to apply just the right amount. There we go. So now again, we're going to take our tweezers, going to kind of line it up. There we go. And then we're going to press that evenly into the housing. And there's the front. So we have our number boards in place on the front here, and that glue will hold it in there. Now we're going to do the back ones here as well. And so what we're going to do now, in this case, I have the LEDs just kind of hanging and dangling here. I haven't done any of the sealing, but you can kind of see here on the inside where the black paint is. That's where the class lights and the headlight are at. And so with the black paint, that seals those off. So what we're going to do is we're basically going to do the same thing here on the rear. I'm going to take a little bit of the microscale crystal clear, and we're going to kind of just put an edge of glue around here. And we will be filling this in a little bit heavier. Right now we just need to get the lens placed. So we can put a little bit in here, kind of like that. Now we're going to grab our number board that we've cut to fit, and we're going to try to fit that in there just like that. And this time I'm going to come in at it from the side, and that should, whoop, went a little too far. So let's put it back in. There we go. And just like that. So you can kind of see it's in there. Looks like the top's a little, there we go. There we go, just like that. So we're going to do the same thing for the other side. And honestly, I'll tell you, I did kind of test fit these lenses a little bit ahead of time. So to make sure that they were pretty close and fit really well. So there we go. And we're just taking our toothpick like that. And then we'll grab the other number board here. Oop. Let's see. And there we go. Oop. Looks like I need to push it a little bit on the inside here just to flush it out. Oop. As you can see, when we're doing this, putting it in, it's a little odd because we're trying to get it flush as much as we can. Let's see. Let's make sure this side is in. Okay. There we go. I think that's okay. So this will give us kind of something to look at there. So we've got our two number boards in the front and the rear. Let's try that again. The front and then the rear. So basically we're ready to go. And I just hit this and knocked this loose. So let's put this back in the handrails. Okay. So, we're basically ready to go. We've got our driveline assembled, ready to go. We've got our ground lights installed on this. And then now the only thing left is to kind of test the lights. So what I've done prior to the filming was I paired off all the light wires off to the side here. And let's make this microscale crystal clear go off to the side for the moment. And what we're going to do, let's take them on this side so it's a little easier for me to reach them. What we're going to do is we're going to test these. So now to test them, I have again, my LED tester, 9-volt battery. This has a 1,000 ohm resistor in lead. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to clip onto the reds here, which are the function commons, all tied together. There we go. Then what we're going to do is then we're going to take the black wire and we're going to test each of the lights. So this is, there you go, there's your number boards. And you can see that they're working and they're illuminated and they look good. Now let's see, where's the other wires? It kind of went under here somewhere. Here we go. Here's another one. Let's test this one. There's our headlight. So those work. Now we need to find the class light wires. And these are right here. So our class light wires, there we go. So now you can see that all of the lights work on the front. You'll test it, do the same thing on the back, and then we're ready to go and do the decoder installation. So this way, you can make sure that everything works the way you want it before you're putting it in. You can see I've got the same thing and I've already tested them on the back. Now once this crystal clears kind of solidifies a little bit, then what I'll do is I'll come inside here and put big blobs in there to kind of seal it up inside the inside here, so that way I can paint over the LED and make sure that that light stays contained in just the number boards coming out of the back of the model here. And I'll do that, and then this model will be ready for part 4, decoder installation. Okay, so as we finish, wait a minute, let's take off the magnifying glasses. So as we finished working on and getting the model ready for decoder installation, I know it seems like a lot of work, and it kind of is, but honestly it's kind of fun to do, and it gives you a unique model now that nobody else has because you've done the work, and now I've shown you how to do it. So what I'd recommend is doing some practice. Get maybe some scrap models, maybe some dummy shells or something like that from the old Tyco pile or something like that, and just start drilling and planning or practicing, making sure you know how to make those holes so that way when you're ready to tackle the model you want, you've got some experience with you and you're not going in it blind. But to be fair, we just showed you how to do a lot of this, and this is kind of the work that I do to put my models ready to go so that way I can light them up all over the place. Now on these particular models, I'm not installing things like the step lights or the courtesy lights around there. I've decided that I don't want to do that on these particular models, and that's okay. It's, you know, it's something if you want to do it. There is a video on our YouTube channel how to add the step lights and things like that. So, and then adding the courtesy lights around the walkway. It's a simple process just like I've shown you in this particular video. So the next step, which will be part 4, is actually doing the decoder installation. And what we're going to do is we're going to use our Blue Nami decoder, and then we're going to use a scale sound system speaker from JT Burke up there in Ohio. And we're going to put all this together, wire in the lights with some LEDs and resistors like we've done, and button it up and be ready to go. So you'll have a nice, pretty illuminated model ready to go. And this is a practice you can use on a lot of older models. So if you have some of the Athearn Blue Box, or if you have any of the older models like these RTRs that you want to just add just a little bit more detail to it, this is how you can do it. So hope this was enjoyable and fun for you. I know it's a little bit of a long video, but hopefully it was informational. So if you have any questions, you can feel free to leave them in the comments below, or you can email us at support@SoundTraxx.com, and either Tom or myself will be happy to help answer questions for you so that way we can help you enjoy your model railroading just a little bit more. Now the last thing before I go, a couple of things, I guess. First off, be sure you're subscribed to the channel. Make sure that you hit that notification bell so whenever we post video content, whether it be these informational videos or when we do our podcast, that you get notified so that you can come in and watch our latest videos of what we do, whether it's be tutorial, informational, or product identification or product features. And then the last thing I'll say is don't forget, go to SoundTraxx.com so you can get your special limited edition 35th anniversary t-shirt from your friends here at SoundTraxx. So be sure to check out the website to see how you can get your t-shirt. So guys, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.